Do you think it's a good idea? Maybe we could wait a extra 5 minutes or something just for
Yeah,
other people.
I think
Yeah, no
it's a good
problem for
idea.
me.
As we had this problem with the link, it's better.
Yeah.
We are going live on YouTube now. Starting the live
Okay.
stream.
Okay, we will just wait 5 more minutes to have people, but yeah, you can start the stream.
Okay.
They are not recording.
I think it's a good idea.
We had 30 something register, Mayo. Is that correct?
Sorry?
We had 30 something people for registering.
Yeah.
So we should
30.
get, yeah.
We are supposed to have 30 person,
Yeah.
and plus I sent the link to all the attendants of the previous sessions.
Yeah. Okay, cool.
So we can wait for maybe 5-6 minutes.
Yeah.
Most of the time, people are arriving in webinars with 5 minutes late. Especially in Europe, it's quite early in the afternoon, so people are just coming back from lunch, I think. And yeah, for the FAO, the lunch break is just over exactly at 2 p.m.
The only time of day we can do this then. Not before.
Can I attend the lectures?
Nomadism.
What?
Seminar Nomad.
Yeah, I have
yes.
already number one.
Sure.
So welcome to everybody. We will start in a few minutes.
Mael, some people that registered told me that the link is not working.
Yeah, I sent a new link to everybody.
Ah, okay. Maybe they didn't see it.
Yeah, maybe I will send it. This one is a good one. I send the great one to you, so you can send it through WhatsApp if you need or anything like that.
Yeah, thank you. It would be perfect.
But it start to work because we are 20. We are waiting for around 30 people, so we will be able to start in maybe 2 or 3 minutes, and
Yeah.
some will join along the discussion.
Along the road.
Yeah. Okay. So maybe we can start, and we'll see if some others join. First, welcome to all. Marie, Julien, and I, along with IFAO, are very pleased to welcome you to this third session of the webinar conversation about nomadism. Some of you already attended the previous session, but for the others, let me provide you with some information. This webinar is organized by the IFAO program Nomade et Nomadisme au Sahara Oriental, which aims to strengthen research network on nomadism and to work together to build a new project which could be fundable to study nomadic societies in order to develop new fieldworks and new remote studies. For example, using satellite images or textual sources. The chronology covered by this program is deliberately very broad, as we are interested in nomadism from prehistoric times to the present day, and the special focus is centered on Egypt, Sudan, and Eastern Libya, although it may extend to other regions, particularly in the case of societies that have moved beyond our main scope. The program is directed by Marie Bourgeois, Julian Cooper, and myself, and currently includes about 20 members from diverse institutions, from PhD students to emeritus. And we will be holding a first workshop in April 2024 at the IFAO. So welcome to everybody, and thanks to our speakers for today. I'd like to pass the floor to Julian, who will introduce the theme of today's session. Thank you, everybody, to be there.
Thank you, Mayo, and thank you everyone for coming. And just a short note, we had a confusion with the link, so if you want to send a new link to any colleagues that may want to join, please do so. This seminar today, we have 3 speakers speaking on the topic that we called Views from Eastern Sudan, possibly my favorite topic because it's the part of the world in which I investigate. For Egyptology and Egyptian archaeology, Eastern Sudan might feel like a very distant realm, a vast desert far away from the Nile. But for thousands of years, ancient Egyptians mined, traded with, and traversed this space, interacting with its nomadic population, in historical texts variably termed Medjay, Blenis, and today's Beja. The Beja make this vast desert their home, a people who have kept their indigenous language and traditions for millennia. From the earliest epochs, these people kept herds of cattle, sheep, and goat, a herd that was supplanted by the camel in later history. In search of vast gold wealth, this desert was never empty, but witnessed a constant trade and interaction between urban regimes on the Nile and indigenous pastoralists. Eastern Sudan, like the perhaps more familiar to this audience, the Eastern Desert of Egypt, is a desert wedge between the Nile, the Red Sea, and differently to the Eastern Desert of Egypt, the Ethiopian highlands, which we'll hear about today, and interacted with all these cultures continuously in terms of trade, diplomacy, and conflict. But unlike the Eastern Desert of Egypt, this desert of Eastern Sudan is quite fertile. Summer and winter rains replenish pastures, and high altitude environments give surprisingly fertile ecology to this corner of the Sahara. For historians and archaeologists, much of this desert history and archaeology is putative and preliminary, and even hypothetical. But huge strides have been made in recent years, notably by the colleagues that are joining us here today. Mixing environmental history, ecology, geology, and archaeology, these talks will give new insights into nomadism in the Nile Basin. As an archaeologist who's worked in this part of Sudan myself, it is my pleasure to welcome today's speakers, Gitske Andersen, Knut Kuczynski, and Stefano Costanzo. Our first paper is a joint presentation by Gitske Andersen and Knut Kuczynski. Gitske, I'll introduce first. Gitske is an ecologist and geographer. Her research focuses upon landscape and environmental change in time and space, and how these changes are influenced both by social and natural factors. Human interference, in particular our use of natural resources, is central. She is interested in how traditional land use has shaped cultural landscapes and how abandonment of this use interacts with concurrent environmental and climate effects. Much of her research is focused on the arid regions of Egypt and Sudan and the ecologies that frame this human-environment interaction. And Knut Kuczynski is an emeritus professor in pollen analyses and vegetation history, archaeobotany, ethnobotany at the University of Bergen, whose work has taken him from the fjords of Norway to the wadis of eastern Sudan. Throughout his varied and illustrious career, Knut has worked on ecology, environmental history, archaeology, and like Gitske, much of this research has been spent working on the landscape and cultures of eastern Sudan, championing discussions on pastoralism and environmental management in the Beja landscapes. Their talk today is entitled Traditional Nomadic Landscape Use in the Red Sea Hills. And Gitske and Knut, if you want to share your screens, you may now begin your presentation.
Thank you, Julian. Sure. Okay, do you see the presentation?
Perfect.
Yeah. Okay, thank you for the nice introduction. Knut and I will present together. As you just mentioned, we have both been working in Eastern Desert and the Red Sea Hills, and I will probably use the Red Sea Hills and Eastern Desert a little bit mixed. But anyway, we will talk about the desert area east of the Nile, both in Egypt and in Sudan. Knut has been around there in that area since the middle 80s. And I was introduced to Sudan only in beginning of 2000, when I finally had an opportunity to go there after doing my master's and PhD in the Eastern Desert. So we're going to cover a little bit what we have done with focus on the land use among the pastoral tribes living in the area today. So just to put it in a more long-term framework, we will first say a little bit about the desiccation of the Green Sahara. And as you probably are very familiar with, this was a green area until around 5,500 before present, when a desiccation started. And this figure from Cooper et al. Shows their finds from the Eastern Sahara, mainly Western Desert. And it clearly shows how over time different types of land use developed from foraging more towards specialized pastoralism. And the desiccation, as I mentioned, was around 5,500, and we can also see here, going from Egypt down to Sudan, how this desiccation was slower or later as we go south along the aridity gradient. So in this transition, people had to change their land use and be more mobile, and also change primarily to smaller stock, more mobile, smaller stock. So we had this pastoralism that developed in this period. And at least to my knowledge, some years ago at least, one of the sources from Libya by Delarnia, he showed that, found some evidence in the Caucasus Mountains of what was, at least at that time, probably very early signs of vertical transhumance, where they moved the small stock up in the mountains while probably keeping the larger stock, the cows, down by a lake at that time. So this also, of course, happened more to the east, east of the Nile, but probably because of the mountains and the proximity to the Red Sea, this north-south aridity gradient was a little bit shifted north. So if you are at a certain latitude in the west, you could be further north, having more humid conditions in the east of the Nile. So there are not so many places where we can study that environment, but we have the Sodman Cave and the tree shelter, both showing some humid pulses at a little bit later perhaps than 5,500, but at least showing that it was still some more humid pulses around that time when it started desiccating. Also further north, all the way up to 27 degrees north, there are still some relicts of tropical vegetation elements found today. This was shown by Hobbs in his some of his publications. And there are also some paleo lake sediments, maybe in Minitel Hair, around 25 degrees north. And also from Sudan, which is not so surprising since it's further south, we have seen paleo lake sediments around 19 degrees. In Arcoit, we also have sources saying that there was flows of water, maybe up until 1700 to 1900 BP. So all in all, what this means for the people is that while it was drying up west of the Nile, they had the better conditions longer in the east to transition toward pastoral livelihood.
Yeah, the reason for this we can find on a larger geographical scale. As you see here, you have the Hyatts and you have the rainfall average. And remember, these are 30-year averages. So in the central part of Sahara, we are down to 0.5 millimeter at the average of yearly precipitation at the average of 30 years, which is actually quite low. And then it increases southwards and northwards as you move towards the borders of the desert. Now, there are two rainfall regimes in this eastern Sahara. One is the winter precipitation that comes from the northeast, winds crossing the Red Sea, extracting moisture from the sea. The hot winds extract moisture. And when it comes to the hills, this moisture is lifted orographically by the mountains, and it causes rainfall on the eastern side of the summit. So these are the winter rain regimes. Then you have a summer rain regime, which is driven by the monsoon. There is actually enormous amount of water in the sense of absolute humidity that are transported over the dry Sahara, but it doesn't help at all because the water is in vapor conditions. But the monsoon, when it's at its strongest, will then move in this direction, and again, as soon as you hit mountains, the air is lifted, cooled, and then even rather small mountains will create precipitation and not the least condensation of water. So these two regimes are governing this area, and in some of the area, especially in the summit area of the Red Sea hills, you have both regimes. So you may have summer rain in good years, and then you have winter rain coming later on. Both of them very low. Now, this we have here a closer look on the region that we call at Bai. It's actually an old name for the whole area between Suez and the Eritrean border. And in this area, there are pastoral nomads. The name has been translated to us as some sort of the notion of the good land. These in the far north, we have the Maasa, which is actually a tribe that's quite new to the area. It came from the Saudi and took land from the Ababda a few hundred years ago. That's why we find some difference in the type of land use management, but still a lot of things are still the same. The Ababda was part of the Beja tribe, but they now distance themselves from it and claim a more religious origin coming from the pilgrims that was moving to Mecca. But Ababda is in all ways culturally a part of the Beja tribe. South of that, mainly from about the border to Sudan, you find the Bishari, and south of that, Amara. You have the Hadandoa in the south, and even further south, you get the Bani Amr. Bani Amr differ from the other tribes by not speaking to Bedouin as the others, but are speaking Tigre. And there is again a discussion, especially these days under the political situation in Sudan, whether Bani Amr is considered a Beja or not. There might be historical reasons why Bani Amr is Tigre speaking, but we can come back to that if any one of you would like to hear more about it. Now, this area is a mountainous desert, and the summit is rather close to the sea, as you see here. That gives, yeah, we can have next. The wadis are extremely important for the nomads as well as for all sort of life. In the wadis, water is concentrated from all the uplands, and it ends up in these valleys. The water comes in pulses, at least when it comes to, particularly when it comes to rain. You can have heavy rain and then years without. Then you have the small showers, which often come in very different places, but they all end up somewhere in the big wadis. This has given the possibilities for the nomadic agriculture practices that is called kirab in Bedouin, sad in Arabic. These are water harvesting techniques where you make a small, as you see in this case, a very, very low dam, and the seepage, the water that flows will be slowed down by these dams, and it will soak in the area behind. So they make these dams and then hoping that it will be some rain. If not, the investment is, and they are sowing behind it, and then the investment is not so big. So if it doesn't work, it's not a big loss. Here is larger ones, more modernized, showing how they try to capture the water. A big flood will destroy the central dams, but still you will have water in the small coming into the smaller dams on the side. So there's most chance of getting some harvest is big. But you see also how water follows is important for the natural vegetation, and not to forget how water is captured in small depressions. Here is some granite rocks where that have some hollows, and a small rainfall has filled them, and people are coming to let their animals drink.
Okay, so due to these special conditions in the wadis and the presence of these mountains all through the range from the north of Sudan down to from the north of Egypt, sorry, down to Sudan, gives the same type of landscape. And as we can see here, we have wadis. This is coming from different locations from Jebel Alba up to further north in the Eastern Desert. So you can see clearly that we have the same type of landscape, but due to the aridity gradient and especially the amount of rainfall flooding through these wadis, we have very different densities of trees. So these small dots are trees in the landscape. So if we take a look more what it looks like actually in the landscape, we can see here from the north in the Masa territory, around 27 degrees north, we have the acacia trees. And if we go into the Ababda territorium, it's the same type of landscape with the acacia trees and so on as we go south. The difference is the amount of trees and the density of trees, and also somewhat more species diversity the further south we go. But still, the acacia is the main species in all this landscape from north to south. And it can thrive in these valleys because of the optimal water conditions. So as soon as the wadis flood, there is opportunity for the tree to sprout. And if it's flooding again, maybe 2-3 times after or in a row, the seedlings will be able to survive and establish as a tree. So the good thing with the trees is that they are there all the year around, which is not the case for the ephemeral or the annual plants that only comes after rainfall. So this is why the acacia trees are so important, because they provide a resource all the year around, both in terms of different types of fodder, leaves, and pods especially.
Here we'll have a map of the Sudanese part of the Beja territory. The summit area is this stippled line, and the Beja call the areas to the east of that line or Gunub. This is the area where they have most winter rain, and they call the western part Olib, where you mainly catch the summer rains. This is the type of moving from between their home area to Gunub and Olib is the type of more typical nomadic movements you have, but they don't do this every year. That all would depend on the conditions in Olib and Gunub. Locally, transhumance, rather small movements between pastures in their local area, is dominant. And again, it all depends on how the rains have been. To cover for all this, the Beja have a very complicated set of landowner rights. in their unwritten law, the Selif, that is passed down from generation to generation. And in the Selif, it say that every Beja have the right to have their animals in Olib and Gunub. They also have more detailed ones, which areas for the neighboring tribes they are allowed to graze. But in general, all are allowed to graze their animals in another tribe's area. But you cannot turn stones. You cannot do permanent changes. In addition to this, there are these rescue areas. For instance, the Hadendoa have the rights to graze the areas of Gush and Tokar, which are agricultural areas, and they graze these areas after harvest. Now, how do they use these trees? Trees are again the important thing. You could say that when you have heavy rains and you get grasses and flowers, that's a surplus. That's some sort of nomadic heaven. You cannot overgraze these herbs when they come, because they will last very short anyway. So just use them, no problem. The trees, on the other hand, you have to maintain in a special way. And the way of using the trees are very old. We have on top Egyptian New Kingdom images showing how it was in the past. And when we look down, we see that the modern inhabitants use the same thing. One thing is that the animals graze directly from the trees. Sometimes you can see goats climbing high up in the trees and are sitting there like birds. And then another important way to harvest is to shake the branches of the tree, and then leaves, and in particular pods, will fall down for the animals to eat. That's why when it's very often kids that are herding the animals, and when they take the shaking stick, and then all the goats come and follow. And then what is very special is that they are pollarding the trees, cutting branches, and the branches that falls to the ground is eaten by the animals. And in addition, all these dry branches on the ground, they provide a stable source of energy and firewood. So the use of the trees actually shape the tree. The smallest tree, they leave them, but when the tree is high as a man, you can start to clean the trunks so that animals can use the shadow under the tree. And then if there is they call this circumcision, shishaknoit. And they claim that in this way they help the tree to grow up faster. And they also when seeds sprout and small seedlings appear, they take care of them by protecting them so that they get a chance to grow up. So if you go to an area that is not in use, as this one in the Western Desert, you see that the trees have quite a different form. Branches go all the way up, and branches are hanging down to this. Quite a rough view of these. They don't look pretty. The Vedja say. So they look bad and they're dense of dry wood, and this will make the tree they cannot breed, and they should be remove the branches to help the tree. Now, what happens when you prune the tree and pollarding the tree? It happens is that the new shoots are coming. For every branch you cut, more branches are coming from the same place, and this gives the crown a very dense appearance. It increased the biomass, and it increased the effect in when condensing air from the humid night winds. So they will claim that they are doing the pruning both for fodder and what they call beautification. And the words for it, wok, or it actually means beautification. This has been described in colonial papers as a terrible way of destructive practices. But actually, this is one of the best way that you can treat a tree for it to live long and produce a lot. And there's rules, a lot of rules how to do this, so that you don't you get the optimal result, but you don't destroy the tree. The Masa don't do this. They either disappeared or they didn't bring that practice when they came from Saudi.
As Knut already mentioned, they also do this shaking. So in this picture here, we can see two women that has been shaking the tree and collecting the pods. So pods is the most nutritious fodder that the tree is producing. And when they talk about the tree produce, they call it gifts. So the tree has different gifts. It has leaves for the animals, and it has the pods. And the pods are the most valuable fodder, and they use it especially for the young animals that cannot walk so far. So they might bring the pods back to their camps, and in some cases they dry them and keep them for later use. And these two figures here is for the two different subspecies of the most common acacias in the area, the radiana and the tortilis. And what is important here is, so this is like a calendar and showing when the different gifts of the trees are given. So we have the flowers, the pods, and the leaves. And what's important with these two species is that in places where you find both of them, you can see that especially the tortoise gives pods in the dry summer season. So if you have both, you're very lucky because you have pods and leaves all the year round for the animals. So as Knut also mentioned, that we have this sources saying that people are destructing trees, especially when they're talking about how they are pollarding and pruning the trees. But if we look more to ecological literature about principles, ecological principles, and what is how these trees are adapted to the arid environment, we can actually see that several of the practices that the nomads are doing are in line with what these trees are adapted to. So just the fact that these tending practices are very old, maybe probably several thousand years, is in itself an indication that they must have been sustainable. But in addition, we have the fact that migration, transhumance, and rapid movement, especially when kids are herding the animals, are very well adapted to the fact that the faster you move, the less you destroy, especially for the small seedlings and saplings that we need to, or that need to be taken care of for new generation of trees to establish. We also mentioned the ownership rules about what is allowed and what is not allowed. So guests can do certain things but the owners can do more harder kind of tending, like the pruning, for example. But this is very strict. And they also have rules about how often you can do it, what size of the branches you can cut. And when we compare this with literature about gardening, for example, and maintenance of trees, these rules are very similar to what is recommended in that type of literature. They also have very strict rules about felling of green trees. That's absolutely not allowed. And in the Mars area, Hobbes explains or describes these lineage tree reserves, where actually it's a task of a certain family to look after trees in their region. And when the older ones dies, the son take over this responsibility to look after the trees. So that's a way of protecting the trees. And this is, of course, very important in such a dry environment. We have this ecological effect or principle of storage effect, which means that since we have so rare occasions of rainfall, trees can very seldom recruit or regenerate. So that's why we need the old trees, because they are the seed producing individuals. So they produce seeds all the time, but most of the seeds will be destroyed and never be new trees. But when eventually we have the rain, then these seeds are available. So we need the trees to be there all the time to produce seeds when the rain is finally there. So that's why it's so important to not kill the green trees. And yeah, so there are many examples like that that we looked into, and in our opinion, when we compare to ecological principles, we see that there are very much of sustainability in all these ways to tend their landscape and their trees. And this is also known from other nomadic groups in other regions. Just another point is that early on there was a lot of large mammals in this area, but due to hunting, which is shown in this Sahur scene, those animals are exterminated from the area. So that means that we don't have animals to eat and prepare the seeds for sprouting. So we know that animals are helping seeds, or the digestive system helps seeds to sprout more easily when it rains. So knowing that all this natural fauna is gone, the domestic animals actually plays quite an important role. So the figure here shows that seeds eaten by goats sprouts better than seeds found on the ground. And this is also shown from the Negev desert, that domestic animals have a positive effect on regeneration of tree populations. So management by people and their domestic animals is an important role actually today for these ecosystems to maintain in a good state.
Now, the importance of trees, when they are so important to people, it's expected that they also find part of their spiritual life. One of the best examples of this is that the spirits of nature, they often live in the crowns of the trees. And it can be good spirits and it can be bad spirits. So you always have to be aware. And in the segregated family life, where women live in the tents and men is roaming around, then when a woman gives birth, the placenta is dug down in the soil in the tent. But for the boy, if it's a girl, if it's a boy, the placenta is carried out and placed in a tree. because that is where the men are living. You see here, and we call them boy trees, and we find that these baskets hanging in the trees where from every time that the boy has been born. This is an old picture from colonial literature, and you can see baskets hanging down from this boy tree here. Now, what is happening is that the last half a century has been great changes, economic and social, changes in this part of the desert. In particular, we find that recording stopped. Okay. The great relief operations have caused changes in both in the movement of people. They stay more in one place, waiting for food relief, and they also move less with their animal. Now, grazing is very often found around the small villages and towns, and then you get overgrazing because there is no rapid movement anymore. The small villages pop up, being bigger and bigger from year to year, and you get an urban development. In general, this causes degradation, at least locally. But the degradation is perhaps larger on the mental place, that during this you lose knowledge. For instance, simply by the practices of herding animals, which kids do in a certain age, if they don't do it, then in those years, then they never learn how animals should be grazed properly. Yeah, we made a little film of the importance of trees, and are you going to run it from your place?
Amo, do you want to try run it from the e-file? That video link, I'll just send it out again.
The problem is that they seem to have some difficulties with IFAO connection. This is why the recording stopped, because we just lost the IFAO for a few minutes. So
have we tried to run it from here?
Yeah, try to run it from there. Yeah.
Maybe you can try
the TV now from here, from the IFAO.
Okay.
Sorry, the computer glitched for a bit.
Of North Africa were once green savannas with trees, lakes and rivers. Remnants of this humid past can still be found within today's desert. Trees such as the sayal, Acacia tortilis, survive by taking up moisture from deep down in the soil. Under their crowns, a favorable microclimate creates islands of biodiversity. desert people have tended this vital resource through millennia. Beja people are indigenous to the eastern desert in Egypt and Sudan. They roam with their animals between the Nile and the Red Sea for fodder, wherever scattered rain provides it. The main fodder resource during the long dry periods is the acacias. Nomad ways of using trees can be traced back at least to pharaonic times. Trees are browsed and harvested by shaking and pollarding. To shake for seed pods, leaves and flowers, the herders use a long, hooked stick. The animals gather for the fodder that falls to the ground. The pods are the most nutritious and valuable fodder, and some people collect pods for young and weak animals that don't move with the flock. Regeneration of the trees is difficult, and people protect seedlings from being uprooted by passing animals or trodden down. When the tree is like a sitting bird, it's a virgin, and when it is like a standing man, it is considered strong enough to withstand browsing. Side branches are cut to strengthen the tree and make it grow faster. This gives the tree its characteristic shape, with a clean trunk and accessible shade. To circumcise a tree, shishaknoit is an investment for future use. As the tree matures and grows, it needs more care. It is renewed by trimming the crown to let new branches grow. Among the Beja, this is called wak. The Ababda call it jani. It should be done with a few clean strokes of the axe, without splitting the bark, so as to prevent water entering cracks. Wak is also done to produce fodder. Then smaller, finger-thick top twigs are cut. Regrowth gives dense branches the first year. And after 2 or 3 years, these branches give flowers and pods and can be cut again. Tahir says, "We don't cut acacias when the southern winds are blowing. But it's okay to pollard the balanitas tree. Before they cut, they ask to be forgiven." Broad-leaved trees like the Balanitis aegyptica are pollarded for fodder. Wak is good for the tree. It cleans, renews and keeps it young. It shapes the tree, and if it is stopped, the tree will grow wild with long, heavy.
So we lost the FAO.
Apologies. Maybe this is
sorry.
a good time to start questions. Do you think?
Yeah, we can try. It's sad that we can see the end of the video, but at least we have the link,
Yes.
so we can see the remaining parts later. Unfortunately.
Yeah, I think we only lost the last minute. That's right. Good screen.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the link is here in the chat, so everybody can see the content.
So first of all, just a round of applause and thank you for the presentation. Really enjoyed that and gave me a lot of food for thought as a historian and archaeologist. We have some time for some questions now, and there'll also be time after Stefano's talk for sort of a group discussion. But if anyone has some questions now, please put your hand up on Zoom, or you can use the chat box as well. And there's also people in the e-file that can ask questions too. So we have two questions from Marie first, I think.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much for this very interesting presentation. I wanted to ask you, you said that one tree can feed two goats. Do you know if it can varies following the size or the age of the tree? And do they feed the livestock with maybe complementary food like forage supplies they may buy to sedentary people, for instance?
Well, the saying that one tree can feed two goats is a general one. They've heard it both in the north, in the Egyptian part of the desert, and in Sudan. And of course, a large tree produce more than a small tree, and so on. But it's more an average
Okay.
statement. Other well, if you have had rain and that you get grasses and flowers on the ground, you get supplementary food, of course. But we're always thinking about the trees as the basic fodder that can sustain life in the desert. So this is the minimum for existence is the trees. So I don't know where, but I haven't seen them feed them with other things apart from in agricultural areas. They sometimes take the remnants of Dura and they use donkeys to transport this to the villages to feed the animals there. But in the real nomad life, it is the trees that feed the tree. And remember, the goats can live without drinking if the leaves are fresh and good. In some part of the year, the leaves are drier, and then they have to move to a place where they can let the animals drink.
Okay, so trees are enough most of the time. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. I think the next question is from Angelica Lovasa.
Yeah, hello. Yeah, thank you very much for your presentation. And you focused on the usage of the trees for animals, but I wanted to ask you if you came across also as usage of trees as houses, of course, just to give shadow, but really like huts around houses. What we, for example, we saw in the Bayuda small houses, huts built around the tree. So it is a kind of merging the tree and the hut. Did you also find this in the Eastern Desert?
Yeah, well, in the old-fashioned way of housing and the Beja land is boat-shaped tents made of mats from the dawn palm. These are expensive, and today people have stopped, or not stopped, but they are less available with these mats. So then they more often build houses of branches to produce the shade. The houses are there for shade. It's not for the rain. And it happens. I've seen houses that already sort of wooden houses that are built up around a tree, so you get shade for the crown and you get shade from the house. But again, for men, they do not live in the houses. They live out under the trees. And so the woman owns the house and all the household.
Thank you.
Very interesting. Niall?
Yes, thank you very much for this talk. I have a few questions. The first one is: we saw goat and camels, but can we feed also sheep, donkey, or any other animals with acacia or not? Do you know if the size, the herds regarding tree numbers, and how it works when there is several different groups in an area to be sure that there is enough tree for every goat, for example? And last question, do you have any idea of how the bejas are knowing that it rained somewhere?
How they know if it rained? Yeah.
Yeah.
I think
How
especially in Sudan, they have this sakanab. You know, when the people meet, they always greet and they tell all the news, and then about rain and yeah, grazing condition is one of the top topics that are coming up. So, and this is spreading incredibly fast. So sometimes it's a mystery how fast information actually travels in this landscape. And for the sheep and trees, they are not as good browsers as the goats. So they prefer grasses and herbs, but actually we never saw that many sheep in the areas we've been working. It's mainly goats, but of course sometimes there are sheep. But
and then they are fed by shaking and cutting branches for them. The sheep don't climb trees as the goats do.
Of course.
Yeah. And you had one more question.
Yeah, it was
the last one was about the size of the herds regarding the number of the tree. How is it possible to have an idea of how they deal with finally to put a good amount of goats in the area regarding the number of trees and how it can work with several groups all together, just not to have an unsustainable number of goats.
In general, I think the movement is the key. So since at least traditionally, since they are moving, ideally you should not get that kind of problem. But as soon as people are more sedentarized or move less, you might have too much animals in one area, and then you get problems. But traditionally, they have this guest principle. So if you're a guest, you can graze, you can shake, but you cannot prune or pull out, for example.
Okay.
So they have a special rules for how to do it, and if they should also ask, it's more polite to ask, but they don't necessarily have to ask to just browse and shake. But Knut, you can maybe.
Well, it's if two or three or four other tribes comes to the owner's area, he can regulate how many is allowed to come. And he will, it is his capital, so this will regulate how many. Another interesting thing is that among the transhumans part, then when they come back to a place, they never settle exactly in the same place. They move some kilometers from where they was last time. And in that way, they always give the vegetation a chance to recover, which means that they can better use it. And when kid runs around with the animals, they go in one direction one day, and the next day they go in another. They never do the same direction every day. So movement and changing of pastures are important.
Okay, thank you very much.
I think we'll have one more question from Rita Fried, and then we should probably get on to our next paper.
Thank you. This may be 2 questions, but they're quick. First, it was absolutely fascinating, and thank you. You alluded to the fact that women live in tents, men live outside in trees. Is there more? I'm interested in this role differentiation. Are young girls part of the group that go and shake the trees and herd the animals, or are they kept aside and trained in cooking and so forth? So are there strict role divisions? And also, I found it absolutely fascinating that you were able to get to know these people and they trusted you. And I just wondered if you could say a few words about your field work and any kind of difficulties, or how you were able to ingratiate yourself to these people so that they were so honest with you.
Maybe I can start. But the gender, there are some gender differentiation between about what they are doing. So the kids, and it could be both girls and boys, do the herding with a small stock. They run around and they play, and and then for the shaking, that can be done both by girls and boys, also by women, but often by younger generations. And the pruning is male or man's work. There are some. We were told by some informants that women can do it, but it's not very common. And it's also something about that women can be. This is more to the spiritual side, that the jinnis can be dangerous for the women, and the women can do the tree unclean. So there are sayings like that about the role of the gender.
Women do the processing of the milk, making the butter and which is actually a thing that they mostly sell more than use themselves. But they cannot milk. So a widow must have some men come, a man come and milk for her. The milk will turn bad if she is milking. So these sort of things you have.
And about the fieldwork, so that was a combination of both Knut's experience from many years, and you can go more into that. And then we also have Joe Hobbs was with us, so he had very good contacts from decades of fieldwork in the Maas area. And in addition to that, we had our colleagues at the Red Sea University that was interviewing many of the informants in the Red Sea Hills. And we also had some Egyptian colleagues doing some of the fieldwork in the Badimia region. And they already, some of these had relatives and knew people, in the landscape. So they, had more trust already from the start. And in the cases we interviewed women, we had female colleagues helping with that. So, but Knut, you can add.
I was very lucky, because I found an area that had not been visited much. Actually, it was a white spot on the map, and even the neighboring tribes seldom visited this area because people were thought to be hostile. I came and I went back to the area many years, and then in that way created a relationship. So I'm got very close to. But the thing about interpreters was always a problem, because you have to interview in the local language to Bedawi, because the practices and the names of different things, they get confused when you use Arabic or English, in particularly English, which is only known by city boys, and then there's no name for it. So to get this, and then to be sure that I got the right story, I used a technique where, because these are people that are storytellers, they always go and tell each other stories. So to test whether I've got the story right, I told it back. And if they were happy about it, then I knew I've understood what was wrong. If it was completely wrong, they were uninterested. So so I spent a lot of time on this. It's many years in with the same people that bring me in close contact.
Thank you. I think that's probably all we have time for on the first session. There might be time afterwards to return and have a group discussion. I'll now pass it over to Marie Bourgeois to introduce Stefano.
Can you hear me? Yeah, sorry. Stefano Consenso is a geoarchaeologist. He was trained at the University of Napoli and the Art Sciences Department of the University of Milan, where he currently holds a postdoc research fellowship. His doctoral work focused on the Holocene climate changes and human environmental nexus in the area of Kassala in Sudan, where he conducted surveys collecting environmental and archaeological data on the regional scale, coming across the majesty of the Sahelian nomadic funerary landscapes. Today, he will present us part of his research work in the Kassala region, where funerary landscape is characterized by all sorts of stone tombs and tumuli. He will talk about one of these sort of structures today, medieval drywall shrines. Their origin seems to have been lost in the folds of oral tradition, and no archaeological endeavor has yet been able to clearly define the timing of their appearance and the motive for such prodigious effort. In his presentation, he will report how geomorphology, point pattern analysis, and a dash or ethnoarchaeology can be used to deliver a provisional interpretation of what could be an archaeological conundrum for the ages to come. Are they connected with the Islamization of the region? Are they war cemeteries? Or, for example, do they belong to Beja group or to newly arrived Arab groups? Stefano, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Marie. I'm going to share my screen. Right. Can you see the full screen presentation?
Not in full screen.
Not yet. What about now? Because it is
Perfect.
in full screen. Okay. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. I feel like I'm not gonna be as good as Professors Andersen and Kaczynski, but I'm actually happy about the last remarks that he thought about, which is that the Beja people are storytellers, because this whole work, which was not my main doctoral work, but it is something that happened during my PhD program. It is based mainly on storytelling, which is the Islamic funerary monumentality in the southern Bejaland, which is the region of Kassala, where the Beni Amer and Hadendoa people live today. So these are medieval stone shrines that are found in the land between the Sudanese and the Eritrean border, which is the water Shaka River that gas flows into the Red Sea. So one word about Sudanese geology. Can you see my screen? Because it's saying that connection is not stable.
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay, okay. I got better internet in my house. Sorry. So Sudanese geology is very varied, because Sudan used to be the largest country in Africa. It is very diverse. We have volcanic regions such as Darfur, where Jebel Marra is found, the Nuba Mountains in the south, the sandstone mesas of the Nile Valley. I'm thinking about the area around Meroe, for example, Musawarat, and also the northwest desert dunes. But it is the eastern Sudan that, in my opinion, is the most striking and peculiar in his appearance. So the Kassel region is characterized by these giant granite domes and metamorphic domes, crystalline lithologies mainly, which were pushed up by 600 million years of orogeny and then eroded by the Nile catchment valley. So the landscape pierced by vertical slopes. In pictures, they're never as striking as in person, but imagine all of these domes are close to 500 meters in prominence, so half a kilometer of just granite hillsides. And one of the most interesting lithologies composed of assemblages of gneiss, schists, and migmatites, which is foliate crystalline rocks, which are very resistant, but they're also subjected to weathering, which leads to foliation, so disassembling in foliage, which is important because the tombs that I'm going to talk about now are made like this. So they are drywall shrines made with square slabs of stones, square and flat, which are readily available in the landscape. The most common aesthetics that they have, so they are one story with a domed top, which is often either fell down by weathering and natural happenings, or they are even very often robbed. So this supposedly medieval Islamic shrines, they have been written about just for one site, which is Jebel Maman, in 1912, if I recall correctly, and in 1952 by two English, not explorers, people sent from the government, sorry, I can't find the word now, which are Crowfoot and Poe, respectively. And they did visit this site probably because it is the best preserved one. So during their travels, they were led there by local people, local tribes, wanting to, showcase their landscape and their living place, because nearby this place people live in the tents that we were, Professor Anderson was talking about earlier. And so this is Jebel Maman. A few, and they are, as I said, well preserved. But in reality, there are many more all across the region. So these are other locations, dozens of kilometers far from Jebel Maman. They are not as well preserved, but they are the same kind of tombs. So they are square with a pointer. I'm going to switch out the pointer here. They are square with a domed top, which is often just erased, as I said, by weathering. And they can be just a couple of meters per side, or they can be a bit larger, up to 10 meters sometimes, but usually around 5 meters. You can see here in the distance, this is our Toyota pickup truck, and these are examples of these tombs. Few more pictures. Sometimes they're missing the dome. This is happening in sites where they are most numerous. So probably out of rush to build them. They skipped on the dome part, but they are square and they are also associated with more dome tombs. So this is the same site, just another just location on the same hillside. And they can be really striking in their association, in their overlooking the landscape. This is just a slightly different lithology, but again, it is a kind of rock that if it's stricken, it just separates in flat enough slabs to build such a structure. So as I said, those authors only reported about Jebel Maman, maybe because they are the best looking out of the bunch, but in reality, there are more than 20,000 spread all across the land. And I'm 100% sure I didn't mix them up with round tumuli or other kind of shrines that have been risky. I'm thinking about the 2012 paper on the fishtail Acharetes. And they're not the same thing. I'm completely sure this is just one style of construction, which is Islamic tomb, square in perimeter with a domed top. So they spread all around the Gashbarka watershed. Down here, basically on the board is the watershed between the Gash River that flows in this depression and the Barka River that goes inside the Toka Valley and Delta. So this kind of buildings, they're spreading all over this land, and they are most concentrated actually not in Jebel Maman, but around here, overlooking the plain leading to the Atbara River. And this is an example of how they look from satellite image, why they are just impossible to misinterpret with akachas or other kind of buildings, because they project some particular shade. The dome is well recognizable. If you switch between Google Maps and Bing Maps and S3 Maps, the satellite pictures are taken at different times of the day, so the shape they project is like diagnostic for recognizing them. And just in this little picture, which is about half a kilometer in scale, there are 400 of them out of 1,500 of the entire site. But like in this other location, which is the only place where the lithology is a little bit different, just in this picture, and you see the scale, 100 meters, so just about 1 kilometer, 1 square kilometer, there are 1,200, 1,200 of these tombs. So we have very little known information because there are only actually 3 papers, 2 by those English authors, 1912, 1952, and another more recent one by a Sudanese author from year 2000. It's called El Sadiq. So there's very little known information. There are no excavations carried out and no radiometric dating. There was one excavation by Crawford in 1912, but he just disassembled one and found nothing. But 1 out of 20,000 is not representative. So it is actually completely virgin ground and no radiometric dating. But because it is Islamic architecture, and it has a value by today religious standards, it's not just an old forgotten spiritual kind of building. It is related to Islamic burials. I don't think there will ever be a permit to dig one. I would be personally reluctant to dig one. So is there a way to discover a bit more about them? Yes, there is. This person you see in the picture is the mind behind this work that I'm going to present. So if you have like in-depth questions about the next part, I'm just gonna give you his phone number. So there is a way to do this, which is point pattern analysis. It is some form of like wizardry, in my opinion, but with the right data set and the right, respect to what you're trying to prove, it can provide some sense. So the point pattern analysis is the study of point patterns, which is the spatial arrangement of points in space. In general, points within a space interact on two levels. The first order is the interaction with environmental variables, and the second order is the interaction between points. So the easiest example to understand this is, for example, people are attracted to a certain restaurant. So people are points and a restaurant is an environmental variable. So attraction to going to a restaurant is first order. Once they are inside, people cluster around tables. Tables, again, are environmental variables. So again, people going around tables is a first order interaction. But when they go to tables, people form groups depending on social variables, such as friendship and kinship. And this is a second order interaction. So is this kind of clear? I hope so, because what follows is basically the same concept. So for this work, we formulated a workflow, which is actually very used in this field of research, by which I mean point pattern analysis applied to archaeology, which starts with a land survey, reference photographies from former missions, and sample site control. So I didn't visit all 20,000 of the tombs, but I've seen a solid 3,000. So I have I gained this visual reference for the study that I then undertook from satellite. So with QGIS and satellite imagery, we created the digital data set and the geomorphological map. And then with different GIS softwares, we created raster elaborates and from the data set and the map. And then with RStudio, we created the point pattern analysis protocol for testing the model. So the results are environmental predictors for future surveys, by which I mean a model confirming theories on location can lead you to new location more easily in the future. But also post-predictive interpretative model on the distribution of funerary monuments. So to have a look at it in a bit more detail, the creation of the digital dataset and geomorphological map. So each Kuba was recorded as a georeference point, which is with QGIS software. I clicked on every single one of them. So it was not like those kind of trained AI. I search and click on everyone. So I'm sure that my data set is solid. So over a total area of 20,000 square kilometers, more or less, which is until I kept finding them. Of course, I kept looking around the large buffer. I ended up like going almost into Egypt and Somalia to make sure, but they concentrate in this region of about 20,000 square kilometers. I found a total number of around 17,500 kubas. But for the study, we use those bits for convenience, because every time you run the software, it can take even a few hours to then spit out the output. So we needed to keep it smaller for efficiency. And also the mapping. Each physiographic feature, such as rock type, rivers and wadis, slopes, gravels, kind of soil was drawn as a georeference polygon, which is standard map drawing, really. And also the earlier tumuli of the regional archaeological tradition, and I'm thinking about the cones tumuli, even some Pangrave tombs are found in the region. They were recorded as well and treated as environmental feature. And in the sample area, I have a sample number of around 1,000. Then with the Grass & Saga GIS softwares, we created raster digital elaborates from the dataset and the maps, which is translated, we created polygons that are then converted to rasters, which are grids of pixels of known dimensions. And also we created derivatives of digital elevation models and the Kuba dataset. So every Kuba point from the dataset was computed against each raster and then derivate to quantify the first order interaction. So the interaction between the Kubas and the environment. And then in our studio, we created the point pattern analysis protocol for modern testing. Our studio is just a programming language interface, which draws from open source scripts that you can just mix and match to create workflows that suit your study, your research question. So we tested the weight of each DIM and raster derivative in controlling the regional distribution of Kubas. And the provisional conclusions were like very expected, which is the lithologies, topography, and intervisibility within with all the tumuli influence the regional spatial distribution of the Kubas. We saw this during fieldwork because the Kubas were only concentrated around mountains that were made of very particular stone kinds that just create slabs easily. You just need to strike them and you have a fresh slab. And also they were always above small ridges, so they are protected from intermittent flows, which increases longevity of the tomb itself. And so that was very easy. But when we ran the model, actually the environmental drivers, which is the ones that I just enunciated, fell short, like very, very short in describing local clusters, which did not respond to the purely environmental model. So my colleague Filippo spent many awakened nights. He would text me all times in like 4 in the morning once to tell me that he had the idea. And he found the solution in a book from 1981. So because we figured that the local aggregation of the Kubas were non-random, so they had a sense, in the sense they were not making against the environmental model, he decided to try and fit a Neyman-Scott cluster process to the Kuba dataset. So this cluster process is just algebraical algorithm that was developed for cosmogony and also used for forest ecology. Long story short, this algorithm can generate points in which we have observed offsprings, so something that we can observe, so our data set that can be observed, which cluster around unknown parent points. So we do know about the offsprings, we don't know about the parents, but the offsprings cluster around the parents, which act as centers of gravity. But again, every single offspring can itself become a new parent point. Pretty particular, but it's also used in forest ecology because trees do the same. When you see, when you're looking at a wild forest, you have no idea which one is the oldest tree. But if you just map every single tree, with this algorithm, you can draw back to the actual propagation of the forest, or at least have a solid hypothesis if you need to try and locate the older trees. So we discovered that the second order interaction, which is Kuba-Kuba, is driven by some coded societal behavior, which underlies the growth of these Islamic burial grounds that vastly exceeds simply geographical control. And this wasn't obvious, mainly because the Kubas do not present any hierarchy in size and shape. They look pretty much all the same. When they do not look the same, there is no obvious geometric aspect to the cluster, like differently from, I don't know, like pharaonic pyramids with a giant one in the middle and then the stemming ones, or like in pretty much any culture around the world. So the entire thing was not obvious, but this cluster process fit the data set so well that it makes sense. It is some kind of trust, like blind trust in this. It needs to be taken with a pinch of salt, but because there were no other elements, and also there is no possibility of undertaking excavation, it was worth a shot that it actually worked. So to summarize the entire thing, there is a geological, environmental, and societal synthesis to the whole propagation of this phenomenon. So the regional occurrence of like suitable rock outcrops and advantageous topography it's easier to go where the good rock is instead of bringing rock to some other place if you're looking to build a drywall shrine. It makes sense. But also the presence in the landscape of ancient tumuli attracted Kubas, possibly as a form of respect and sacrality. So the Kubas are found where also the tumuli are found. Settings near older funerary monuments. So the first Kubas, they did respond to geographical drivers, but then the offsprings, they clustered around the parent Kubas, forming the huge cemeteries that exceeded the environmental driver. So in a sense, societal memory, social memory preserve some form of expertise, because building such structures, it's not easy, but also choice of location and reverence towards bygone kings, like for centuries or possibly even millennia. But there is still a question to be answered, which is who built these domes? Sorry. This is very likely the answer, because the Beju people have been like living in the Kassala region for at least a couple of thousand years. We know this from the written sources, and we know this from like many ethnographic studies that have been conducted. Also, we know that they are a conservative society, which is deeply rooted in traditions and reverent towards bygone ancestry. I'm almost quoting the paper by Professor Krasinski from 2012, when he did some works on the Pangrave tombs from the northern Atbai, where he did find the same kind of how to say reverence, I think, of the Beju people toward those tombs, but which, I mean, they do not know who did them, but they're still reverent and they treat them as their own, which is what they do with the Kubas. I've been trying to interview people in these locations, which are very far from Kassala, by the way. So we are talking rural Hadendowa communities having to speak with. And as the same as Sadiq reported in 2000, they have no idea who built them. Sometimes the oral tradition made up for like very flamboyant stories. He did interview people who thought they were made by Romans, and I mean Romans. But in reality, it's probably their own tradition, which is a few hundred years old, but they have forgotten about for some reason. But still, the modern cemeteries of rural Hadendoa are built even within the grounds of these large Kuba landscapes. And there are open questions, which is, did they come from the west or did they come from the east, which is in the Toka? It's probably more about the conflicts with the Arab miners, which brought Islam from the Toka Valley. But still, the topic is so understudied that everything is hypothetical at this point. Although with my work about at least mapping the data set, we do have like a number of approximate number of tombs that were built in the region, and also some hypotheses on the societal drivers for such efforts, because finding like around 3,000 of those tombs clustered together around in about 2 square kilometers was something so striking that I would like never expect from a supposedly desert environment. And that's it. Some faces that you may recognize or not, which were the people who brought me there and the mediator with the Hadendoa communities, and also Professor Manzo, who was my PhD supervisor, and he came with me on these surveys.
So, thank you very much.
Thank you
for this presentation. We can start again with some questions to Stefano, and then move to a wider discussion. So you can ask your question on Zoom or at the FAO. And I see that Julian has a question.
Sorry, as the host, I feel like I'll go first. Thank you, Stefano. That was an amazing paper. You were able to draw a lot of information out of material, which sounds like it's very difficult to date and to connect to a cultural group. So I think that was amazing. The question I had is, like, you have 20,000. Is that right? You said
17,500. Yeah.
Okay, so you have such a huge number. And to me, if you had such a big number in a relatively enclosed space, like in between the Gash and the Toka, that would seem to say it's quite a long history of them. Like you don't just have this in one century even. You'd have this, perhaps across the whole medieval period or late medieval period or something like this, where you have so many different generations connecting to an ancestor. Well, is that the sort of chronology you're looking at, like a tradition that may last for 400 or 500 years, or is it, do you think, more confined?
I'm really not sure, because, for example, in Jebel Maman, they almost all look the same, which may be because they were like built in a very short time period. But in some other places, sometimes they look like they were a bit rushed. In some other places, they are like more beautiful. So it's very hard to tell. They do differ a little bit, but not as much as like possibly being related to like Vararian style evolution, let's say, or at least I didn't look into it because, again, this was like a side quest for my PhD, but it was so striking that we decided to write about it again. Also because Habab Ahmed, which you may know from the ANCAM, I was talking with her at some point, and she was trying to push for like UNESCO status of this landscape. So the more it's written about, the more maybe some recognition it gets to bring it to that point. So we were keen to write about it and to put it on. So actually, this paper is out on PLOS ONE, and it went viral when it came out. So that was something like remarkable about it. But yeah, I didn't look into style evolution because it's actually not my thing. I wouldn't be good enough to it. But I'm keen to share the data, the data set, and everything, because from the satellite picture, you can tell there is some differentiation, but sometimes they happen all together. So unless you go and visit and try to get some dates out of them, I don't think as of now it's possible to state if it's like a very short time period or a few centuries.
With that many as well, you can't really, even if you could analyze the material and excavate and so forth, you can't really feasibly do it on thousands. Thank you.
Okay, Marie, I see you have a question.
Yeah, thank you very much. It was so interesting. I was wondering, did you already try or do you plan to, for example, make some parallels with well-known site of, I don't know, rock art of some wells known already, to maybe have a better idea of the, let's say, preferential occupation of the area, for example, that could give you some information about the origin of this structure, even if it's very large and
so the honest answer is actually not at the moment, because with my postdoc now, I completely switched sites. I'm doing Neanderthals in Italy, so it's a bit different. But I know there are people who are doing this, like for example in Mali, because I see my paper being cited. And I know other people are doing that also, because this kind of stone structure landscapes, they are common across the entire Africa. They differ in style, but the concept is the same. Geological opportunism drives the location, and then there is some kind of ethnographic driver for it. So not at the moment. Again, maybe in the future, maybe when it's going to be possible to go to Sudan again, try and invest with somebody who wants to do that, like as a mission. Because I do paleoenvironment. I'm a geoarchaeologist. I only happened to be there at the right point because I was looking for other kind of stuff. I was looking for paleosoils and that kind of records. But I mean, these stones that were there, I was with Abab Ahmed, who is trying to study them. And so we put this work together in a relatively short time. But again, the data is there. And if somebody wants to take it over, I'm happy to, be supportive for this endeavor.
Okay. It gives indeed really interesting information. Thank you again.
So we have a question now from page 10.
Hi, thank you for the very interesting talk. I was wondering, I know this is maybe a bit of a stretch, but just the Kaaba form often has an association with the veneration of sheikhs or Islamic saints. And
sorry,
obviously
I didn't understand. I'm sorry.
Sorry. So often the Kaaba form of funerary structure within the Islamic context has an association with the veneration of saints or sheikhs or holy men. I'm wondering, I know this is maybe a bit of a leap from exactly what you were looking at, but is that something that you came across any evidence for? I mean, it seems obviously that you wouldn't have such a high concentration of sheikhs in one.
Oh yeah, okay, no, but I see what you mean. Do you know about the Katmiya in Kasara? Have you read about it?
I have not.
that is a big mosque, which is in Kassala city. It's close to today's city center. Used to be the older city center, which is a big mosque, which is the tomb of a holy man related to the Mahdi wars. I can't remember the exact context. But this might be the case. But again, there is no hierarchy, neither in style nor in dimension. So it's probably more about like father, son, grandson kind of thing. Because this, like, apart from the locations being like beautiful. So another driver which is not quantifiable, but I was thinking about when we put the work together, but again, it's not like, it cannot be given a numerical aspect, is how beautiful the locations were, because there were such amazing places that must have been a role in like being the location for such, burial grounds. But no, I don't think this is the case of being related to the holy man in Islamic tradition from that kind, because there are locations, known locations for holy man burials, which then became like entire cultural centers, like as in Kassala. But these are just rural, like very far from any settlement kind of graveyards, like giant graveyards. So I don't think this is a case of holy man location with veneration constructions. I might be wrong, but I don't think this is one of these cases.
Thank you.
I have one question myself. Do you think it would be possible? You say that there is no settlements in the surroundings, but we don't have built settlements. But do you think it's possible, for example, to do some quite extensive excavation, not on the Cubas, but around it in some open places, just to check if there are some campsites in the vicinity with some material? Do you think it's possible first?
You gotta ask the Adendoa. It's not up to me.
Yes. But
because they do live in the vicinity, actually, as we, all the people here who've been in the desert, we all know that you're never alone in the desert. So
of course,
the number of like weird encounters that we had just strolling around and some, you're never alone. So it's probably, it could be viable in some ways, like transhumance routes, or maybe older settlements. I think there would, like, with a dedicated surveys, you'd find evidence for sure. Okay. Even from older Adendoas, because they move around, but then the location, it's just a circle. They move seasonally, but then they come back to the same location. Also because there are some large wadis there, and the crossings never change. So there are certain places to cross the wadis. They are always the same. So it's in some way they are managed. So it's just obliged crossings. They need to cross, and there you will find a village. Maybe the families come and go. I'm not sure about it. Maybe they change over time, but some places you're just forced to go through them, because these wadis, they're entrenched, and they can have overbanks of like cliffs, even also 3 or 4 meters tall. So you can just jump off a cliff. There's the crossing, and there's the village. And then after the village, you maybe reach one of these mountains, and there you will find the archaeology. So to get to the archaeology, you need to pass through the local
of course.
mayor.
Of course. And something which is partly a question, partly a remark. A colleague of mine, Marie-Françoise Boussac, came there, and she was really surprised regarding the fact that the locals did not know exactly what are this kind of tombs. So my remark about that is that I think that in fact it can happen very fast, this kind of a society forgetting something, because when you read Joseph Hobbes about the Mazas people, at the time he went there, they had still a huge memory of many things. And I am meeting every year some Mazas of the same clan, exactly the same clan, the same families. And now they forgot most of their wisdom. They forgot most of the thing we can find in the books and the papers from Joseph Hobbes, and it was only 40 years ago. So it's really impressive how fast it can be, and it has been so fast, I think, for the Maza people because of sedentarization. In fact, most of them now are living in Hurghada. There is only some young boys between 12 and 18 who are still going to the desert with their fathers and uncles most of the time, but not as many as before. They don't spend all their life in the desert. And I think, yeah, it can happen very fast in this kind of situation.
Mhm.
Do you have any idea if, in your case, it's something that could have been forgotten quite recently because of change in the way of life, or do you think it's something older? Do you have any people who still have at least a bit of an idea of what it could be?
I mean, it's very hard to say because the city of Kassala is, I think, is close to 1 million inhabitants now, and also it's surprising how far the network with the city goes, because in one of these locations I was about 5 hours drive from Kassala, not because it's too far, but because it's very isolated, so it's hard to reach. And when we got there, we had a very weird encounter, like anecdotal encounter with the local Hadendowas. So we were there not to look for Kubas this time. We were going to visit some tumuli that we saw from satellite. So we reached the location. We had no idea that people lived there. Also because the tents, the turtle tents or boat tents, they are camouflage. So they're hard to see from satellite pictures. So we had no idea some people lived there, but I mean, like maybe 4 or 5 tents, 20 people. And they did come to us, some, funny encounter, like thinking back to it. But at the moment it was a bit alarming because, the swords we saw in the video and all the kind of, aesthetics, they're kind of menacing if you're not expecting to come into it. And so they do have local knowledge of the land. They do, of course, they told about our right to be there, and if we wanted to go back there to do this and that. And among the things to do was to call them on the phone. And we were like, huh, do you even have a phone? Of course we do. We also have a solar panel. So so again, about how do you know if it has rained in some other place and they just phone each other?
Of course.
Basically.
Of course.
So yeah, it's probably like the city life permeates very far from the city as well. And also when you like go around surveying, you see these old colonial era lorries bringing people to the city. They're not lorries for stuff, for the market. They're lorries bringing people. So they collect Adendowa people from whatever places, even far from the city. They bring them in the city for marketing business or whatever kind of business. And so the metropolitan aspect of Kassala permeated the whole region. So it might be related to it. So the younger people look to the city and in some way forget about it, even though with this community, the younger ones did not speak Arabic. So there have been a few minutes of like misunderstanding because we were trying with Arabic. They responded in Hadendowa Beja. I'm not sure what's the language called. But we did have a Hadendowa member from the ANCAM. So he could mediate. But then it turned out that the older one spoke Arabic. So it was just a matter, it was theatrical, really. But the younger ones did not speak Arabic. So it's very like, it's very complex, I think, to lay out, because the city is permeating, but maybe some aspects they're keeping like traditional. So they do know it's sacred ground. They do not go and try to rob them too much. At least I don't think so. Some kubas are robbed, but they look like they were robbed anciently, as many archaeology in this region is really. But they do have respect. So they know it's sacred. They know it's related to some kind of ancestry. Sorry. But the motives, they've been lost in oral tradition. It's like it's a wireless telephone. So because they do not write, so Beja tradition is just oral. There's no way to like been of scanty interactions like we do, because we only are there for a month per year. So I don't think there's a way to establish enough connection to get to somebody who actually knows what is going on. There might be somebody, but there's many 100,000 people. So
of course. So thank you very much. I had another question from Marie-Françoise Boussac, which was for Knut and Gitske, but which is also linked with what you just told us, I think. She was wondering about the role of children and their attitude regarding the Beja, traditional Beja way of life right now, if they are still involved in the way of life, if they want to go having another kind of life, or are still in this livelihood or not.
I have something to say about the people in Kassel, but I'll let you talk first.
Okay. Yeah, we didn't really interview kids, but from our observation, yeah, it's also a difference between the north and the south. So as it was already mentioned, in the north, the Maas have had this soft sedentarization, and some of the people we were traveling with, they were saying that they really missed the desert and they wanted to go back, and that their kids should learn the traditional life, but there was not much of it. In Sudan, there are still kids and families living out there, maybe you can.
Yeah, the cities are. Well, this differs from place to place, but in the most remote places, the cities are considered as an unhealthy place. They don't want the children to go to school in cities. The air is bad. It's a place you get diseases and so on, and the children are bringing the same attitude. On the other hand, in periods when they have to go, even the fathers had to go for wage labor and so on, they tend to be more attached to the cities. But in general, they appreciate the life out there, the freedom and the healthiness of the area. Was that the answer? Har vi haft kontakt?
Yes.
Can I say something about Kassel?
Of course you can.
Because yeah, it is very unhealthy. Like I remember my eyes being swollen all the time. But point is, in Kassel, the population is split in two, because there is Alendoa, but also there are many Benyammer. And all our workers, I mean archaeological kind of field work with excavation. They are Benyamers, and there are kids, like not kids. We don't do child labor. I mean, I mean 18, 24-year-old young boys. And they are all Benyamer, and they are very like vocal about their Hadendowa counterparts, because Benyamer do want to fit in with the Western kind of way of living. So they adopted the clothing, apart from traditional events like marriages, like weddings, sorry, or mosque attendance, during which they wear with jalabia and sedera, usual long cloth. And apart from those moments, they do wear Western clothes. The Hadendowa don't. They refrain very much from that, and they are looked down by the Benyamer, because the Benyamer think that the Hadendowa are ignorant, and they see in the Hadendowa family stratification a way to keep the society down, because as I saw with my eyes, the fathers don't want the kids to speak Arabic from a young age. So they have to learn in kind of sub-adult age by eventual interaction with Arabic speakings. So they don't go to school to the city. They are kind of homeschooled, if it makes sense. But they sure are more connected with the traditional aspect of living in the desert, which the Binyamer in Kassel, at least, I don't know about Eritrea, they don't do anymore. And I've been told that this self-isolation by the Hadendowa is actually at the very base of the separatist movement of Eastern Sudan, of the Kassala region, from the central government. So the reason why Eastern Sudan, the city of Kassala, is always stable despite what happens in Khartoum is because the Hadendowa just want to be separated and different. And also they set fire to, local government buildings, like more than a few times, which is what they do. I don't blame them, honestly. But yeah, there's a very strong division between supposedly Beja. I say supposedly because, as you said earlier, the Benyamer is not sure if they're Beja. They do call themselves Beja in Kassala, but then they keep on saying we are different. We are Beja, but we're different from the Hadendowa. So there's this divide between Benyamer and Hadendowa, in which the Hadendowa are more rooted in traditional way of even landscape managing and property subdivision in the rural areas.
Okay, thank you very much. We will soon have to end the
Not
webinar.
wants to say something. Sorry.
I just want to reply to this. 30 years ago, all the Benyamer I met were keen on being Beja. They had different explanations why they were not talking to Bedouin, but talking Tigre. But still, they said they were Beja. The recent political development have, however, created a separation. It has to do with who signed the Juba peace agreement and who is what and who. But as you said, the Benyamer are much more keen on being part of the modern scene, while the Hadendowa want to be something special and they want to keep on their traditional rights and their traditional way of living. And for the moment, you see this at which one are supporting which part in the present war. So for the moment there are really clashes between the Benyammer and the Beja. Yeah.
Yeah.
So thank you very much. As I was saying a few minutes before, we will soon have to stop. But if anyone has another general question or remark regarding the general topic of Eastern Sudan, we still have a few minutes. But I think there is no question anymore. Julian.
Oh, sorry to annoy everyone. One quick question.
It's not annoying.
For,
It's very good.
It's sort of for both papers, but I think it's probably easier for Gitzker and Knut to talk about. Is there resources and water and trees aside a maximum amount of time a Beja family would want to stay in one place? So I'm wondering about the social aspect of nomadism rather than just the pressure on resources. And maybe Stefano, this matters as well in regards to funerary monuments. Like, do you have to move in order to do certain tasks that are not related just to pasture and water and food? I think you're on mute.
In general, when you look at the structure of the families, as you go down, each family has their area in the wadi, or it can be smaller or bigger, but they have like their homeland in a way. And some told us that the trees that you can see from your tent is belonging to your family. So they kind of have this attachment to a very specific part of the landscape. And even if they move, there is always somebody left in their homeland to watch the resources. Because if they're not there, anybody can come and kind of use them in the wrong way or try to take the land. Or so from that perspective, at least, they always have a very close attachment to a certain part of the landscape. And then how big this is how they are kind of have arranged it with their closest group and the wider.
And when a group is coming to an area for a season or for a period, they space the tents enormously. There might be kilometers between every tent, and still they're saying that they're staying in the same place. And when they come back, they don't put up the tent in the same place. They move, and the reason for that is that the Jinnis have occupied the former site. The ecological reason is that there are full of parasites that will start to infect the animals, and they will be itching and so on. Plus that you get the chance of overgrazing. So they don't want to stay in one particular place at all very long. But in the place, do you define place as a wadi? They come back to the wadi and they can stay in the wadi for a while.
Yeah. Stefano, do you have any observations on the same? Yeah, my interest out of that comes from the nomadism in Eastern Sudan seems to be quite restricted compared to what, say, typically you would have in textbooks on pastoral nomadism, where you have long migrations and people, as you discussed, vertical transhumance. Whereas everything I've read in the Beja landscape, they seem to maybe go from one side of the Red Sea hills to the other, but not even that all the time. So it's quite a tricky sort of nomadism to define, I think. And this matters a lot for the archaeologists and historians, because we're trying to excavate this sort of nomadism and understand this sort of nomadism. Yeah.
But I think that the whole concept is not invented there. It's invented here in Europe. So nomad as a concept is something that we put to them, and then of course the longer they travel, the more nomad you are. So I think they are moving, but they are moving not longer than needed. So if you have good years when you don't only need to move from one body to another, you do it. But if it's bad, then you have to move longer.
Yeah, pragmatic nomadism.
Yeah.
Yeah. You won't move if it's not needed.
Yeah.
Okay, so thank you very much to everybody, and especially to Gitske, Knut, and Stefano for your talks. It was wonderful. And thank you to the attendants also for the question and for being there with us. The next time we will see each other will probably be for the workshop at the FAO in April, with some also video conference, which would be possible. So we will give you more information when everything will be settled. And thank you again for being there, and see you very soon for a new event of conversation about nomadism, and for new work together in the framework of the program Nomade et Nomadisme au Sahara Oriental. Thank you, and have a nice day or a good night.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye. Thanks
See you
very
soon.
much.